this week's UNCTAD conference, some civil society organizations are pushing to have the body look into tax avoidance and evasion. Now, the scale of the problem is severe through the underpricing of exports or the overpricing of imports, among other means. Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania illicitly exported over $900 million a year between 2002 and 2011. Now, tax avoidance has been a strong focus for the OECD, but as Ramah Nyang found out in conversations with Alvin Mosioma from the Tax Justice Network, the OECD's approach to the problem has few supporters here in Africa.
I just managed to have a glimpse of the texts, and rich countries are coming out strongly against that idea that UNCTAD should be given that mandate to address this problem.
What's the argument they're making?
It beats sense, if you ask me. It beats sense why they should be against it, but I think that, of course, the majority of these multinational companies are not African companies. They are largely OECD countries. So I would assume that there is vested interest in that particular case to ensure that these countries are still continue to be commodity dependent and not progressing to when you're talking, for example, matters of industrialization, for example.
Could the argument, however, be made that, I mean, we've got the OECD right now working on, what do they call it, the base erosion and profit shifting program, exactly. Right? The BEPS program. That's been running for quite a bit of time, and negotiations around that have led to this multilateral information sharing agreement on tax sharing. So couldn't the argument be made there's a bit of duplication there if you've got the OECD working on one thing and then you've got us guys telling UNCTAD, go and look into the same issue?
A very valid point. It's really a very valid point, because that's what actually is some quarters are arguing, that we should avoid duplication. But it brings me back to the question I said, why UNCTAD was established in the first place. OECD is an organization that brings together rich countries. So would you rather that the solutions of rich countries are met by a club of rich, the solutions for problems that are affecting poor countries are solved by a club of rich countries, or an organization that was actually established and given that mandate to solve the problems of developing countries? I would argue the rather. We cannot expect OECD to have the solutions for problems that are affecting developing countries, and that's the point we are trying to make. Secondly, and again coming back to the BEPS process, I think that the BEPS process to some extent is a positive step, because it recognizes that the current global architecture is flawed. It's not serving the interest of the entire globe. Companies are finding their ways to beat the system. So that recognition by itself is the first step, and some of the actions that are agreed under the work program are progressive in that sense. But I think that for developing countries, if you look at what factors actually erode tax bases for developing countries, they must not necessarily be the same. What erodes tax base of a country like Germany cannot be the same as what erodes the factors that erode tax base of a country like Kenya. So
why not then? Just for argument's sake, because these are two parties that regardless will still trade with each other, will still have capital flowing back and forth from the developing world to LDCs. Why not have a mechanism where both sides can have a seat at the table? Why not give developing countries a seat at the table, for example, at the OECD process?
Well, we have been making that demand, but not at the OECD table, but at the UN, just because the UN is the only globally recognized body that is democratically representative in that sense. There's the democracy deficiency within the OECD. As much as they have open doors, and indeed they have, I mean, there's the Global Forum, which brings together a number of developing countries. There is a number of initiatives that have been set up to support capacity building in many developing countries. So in that sense, I think that there are positive steps that are being done within the OECD, but we feel that that's not enough. What we need is a global body within the UN system that provides a space, a democratic space for developing countries also to have a seat on the table and an equal voice.